broad as well as specific call. And with these few remarks, it is now my humble pleasure to declare the 4th CUK Annual Conference 2020 officially opened. Thank you and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now are going to invite the key note speaker. If we could have Dr. Sila Rose on the screen. Is she joining us live? Keynote speaker is joining us from Manchester in the UK. By the time we go over the pandemic, we'll all be IT experts. Do we have Sila online?
In that case, hello. Good morning. Good morning from Manchester. I'll make a start if now is the right time for me to start by introducing myself. I'm Dr. Priscilla Ross. I work at the Cooperative College in Manchester. And first of all, I'd like to do two things. One is to thank you so much for the honour of inviting me to be your keynote speaker today. The Cooperative College and the Cooperative University Kenya go back a long way, and we have very strong solidarity links over many, many decades. It's an absolute delight to be asked to speak to you today. And I'd secondly like to say thank you to everybody who's already made really valuable and important remarks on this call. So I'd thank Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, the organising committee, the young scholars, the academics and others on the call, and of course, above all, in these very difficult times, the technical team, who are actually the most important than anyone in many ways, because they make this happen. So I've put my contact details up in the slide, and I hope I can share my screen, and if so, I'd like to begin my presentation. Thank you. I do hope that everybody can see this, and I wanted to also begin by congratulating you for the nature of this conference, for what it's about, for the idea of really thinking about cooperatives and cooperation in a changing ecosystem. It really helps me to think, and actually getting prepared for this conference and reading some of the papers that your scholars and the people who will be presenting over the next few days have produced have really given me food for thought about the role of cooperation in such a changing system. And it was really valuable to hear one of your speakers before start to tease out what an ecosystem might look like. So in the shortish time I've got with you, I'd just like to share some of the prospects and challenges as I see them. And I think really what I want to do more than anything else is to say that if there's one organisation, one type of enterprise that can really make an ecosystem work, it's the global cooperative movement. And I'm going to try and argue that that's the case. So let me begin by just briefly outlining what I'm going to talk about. I want to say something about disruption, whether that be technological or that relates to COVID, or indeed the ongoing disruption that has caused the characteristic of our world in every country. And then say something about the cooperative as ecosystem. I'd then like to say something about values and principles, and the cooperative as a whole social organisation. And then I'd like to conclude by saying something about the ecosystem and the themes that you've chosen for this conference. And again, I'd just like to say that you are really inspiring for me in the way that you've identified the key sub-themes, which I'll come back to, but the notion of remembering and inclusion. How do we think about this thing and make it work? That's absolutely critical. How we actually address some of the key issues of our time, of course, including climate crisis. How we think about cooperatives of the future, how we've got to think about new ways of running businesses and new sectors that the cooperative movement needs to move into. And then finally, the enablers of cooperation. You know, what are the barriers? What are the strengths? And again, what are the virtues, if you like, of the cooperative model and its great long global history in terms of making some of this work? So you can read slides, and I'm sure they'll be available to share. So I don't want to say much more except to say that I always like to put that very scary picture there of robots. And I've run various day schools at the Cooperative College in Manchester recently called things like, you know, the robots are coming. How do we actually deal in the world of work, in the world of organisations, in the world of wealth and prosperity, with a growing crisis, which is, of course, that automation is starting to reshape the future of work. Now, of course, that's sector specific. It's not the case in all sectors, but of course, gradually it's spreading across the globe. So in some ways, given the fact that livelihood, people living, people putting food in their mouths and shelters over their heads is the most important thing, then actually what do we do when the world of work, whether that be full-time work or precarious work, formal work, informal work, what do we do when that starts being challenged by various technologies? So that is a really critical disruption. A second, of course, is one that you're identifying in this conference itself. Climate crisis, environmental degradation. And of course, it's not just bad things happening to the air quality or bad things happening to the land. It's what it does to people. It's how it impacts on people, how it creates crises and puts an emphasis on how we make our world sustainable. And of course, you'll be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, which the International Cooperative Alliance aligns itself closely to. But how can we work as cooperators to think about sustainable futures in our ecosystem? Another issue that is disrupting the world, of course, and again it's uneven, not everybody is disrupted in this way, of course, are something I'm choosing to call the thickening and sharpening inequalities. And what we're seeing is this happening globally. Now, of course, there have always been immense inequalities between the global north and the global south, and within the global north and the global south. And I'm not underestimating that enormous division in any shape or form. But what I think we're starting to happen as this disruption and this current phase of disruption accelerates is increasing crises in how people live their lives. And that is playing out in all sorts of very challenging ways for cooperatives and others. In particular, a crisis, a growing crisis in mental health in particular, where the infrastructures of countries are struggling to cope, right through to what I would call a democracy deficit. In other words, certainly in the global north, an increasing discontent with democracy, and of course it doesn't always work perfectly by any means, but actually people just saying, you know what, I can't really be bothered to vote. I don't think it's got anything to do with me anymore. So what we're seeing is this a deficit in the sense of decision making, decisions not being taken to the people, but increasingly lower turnouts in elections, people not being bothered, and so on. And I know I'm speaking in some ways from a global north perspective, but we see these trends all around the world. And then finally, that sort of global instability, the slowing of the global economy, which has been well underway, of course, before COVID, and what that's bringing in its wake, and I think we fail to attend to it at our peril, are rising intolerances, people starting to become intolerant of each other. And of course, when we think about the global cooperative values and principles, we know we have a particular set of behaviours and ethics, which means that we challenge those type of intolerances and inequalities. And indeed, when we think about ecosystem, we know that that's one of the ways that we can challenge and address some of these disruptions. One of your earlier speakers talked about ecosystem, and I've just got a really nice picture here. I think this came from you might have seen it before, from a conference that was held in Athens in Greece, which was the School of Fine Art. And it's if you like, a utopian vision of how a cooperative ecosystem could work. And okay, it's maybe a bit of a dream, but there's elements in there that anybody who's thinking about how we build and make and sustain a cooperative ecosystem would inevitably pay attention to. And I think what we can see when we look at that image is the word fair all the way through it. So it's a recognition that whatever we do, whether it's starting from the producer who is, producing the goods, right through to how that product goes to market. It doesn't matter whether it's a very state-of-the-art technology or an agricultural product, but that enters a system which has fairness as its sort of key driver. And that means going right through systems where you have notions of free credit, fair funds, fair access to loans through fair housing, fair healthcare, and so on. So when we think about a cooperative ecosystem, we need to think about the word fair. And of course, that's just an idealized model of what an ecosystem might look like, because one of the speakers who made some opening remarks earlier also talked about the key ways that cooperatives, in perhaps smaller ways, even when we're on the way to building this much better world, this fairer world, can actually develop ecosystem practices and processes in their everyday work. And I'm just going to take us back, very old-fashioned, and forgive me if you can't see that picture very well. But I am going to argue in the next couple of slides, and really to the conclusion of what I'm saying, as I said right at the beginning, why it's quite hard and it's difficult, because we live in a mighty, complex, hard world, which is full of challenges for the cooperator and for everyone. But there are certain elements that are embedded, that, if you like, let's use the word embodied, within the cooperative movement and within cooperative ideas, which will help us to think about what that is. And I'm speaking here from a cooperative college that had its 100 years last year, and is trying to certainly inspired by you, and is trying to develop a cooperative university in the UK about the role of learning in that, and the role of solidarity in that. And I need to say that because, of course, I've also included a little image there, which is from a building just outside Rochdale, which, of course, is the home of the contemporary cooperative movement, although it was 1844, so it's some time ago now, of the Rochdale pioneers. And if you can't read that, what it says in stone on top of a chimney just outside Rochdale is "each for all and all for each." Each for all and all for each, 1893. So the vision was there then, that in order to develop this ecosystem, which actually reflects and is reflected in those values, which you can see listed there, we can use learning to help us get there. And inevitably, because I speak to, as an educator, to a room full and a virtual room of educators, we do need to think about how we can bring on learning in to our thinking around ecosystems. So, of course, what cooperative learning helps us to do and be is self-organised, to reflect on who we are and what we're doing, who we're working with, help us to be solidaristic, and perhaps sometimes something that's forgotten, but I think is as important as anything else in terms of building sustainability, is developing our sense of cooperative belonging, developing our cooperative identity. And those pioneers thought that was as important as building the skills to run a great cooperative business, because their view was that it was only by also developing that belonging that would enable people and encourage people to work and with each other and build the cooperative movement. So the values are a great starting point to think about ecosystems. And one of the reasons, just to conclude on the learning, is, I would just want us to think about why cooperative learning in itself is so important. And when you see the word associative in this quotation, associational, associative, think about ecosystems. Because what Ian Macpherson wrote, some of you will know his name. He certainly visited Nairobi and was a wonderful person in the cooperative movement. He's a Canadian academic, but written very widely on cooperative learning. He said, when he tried to just describe what cooperative learning was, he said that it brings with it a special kind of knowing that emerges when people work together effectively. And that makes collective behaviour more economically rewarding, socially beneficial, and personally satisfying. That is how important association, learning together, learning for cooperation, that's how important it is. It's for the individual, of course, and for the collective. So that's something that's really valuable to keep thinking about when we're thinking about ecosystems. And of course, and has already been alluded to in the opening comments, brilliant opening comments, was this Principle 6. I mean, obviously, you know, all of those principles are really important. And some people argue that, you know, the values are fantastic, but it's actually the principles that are at the heart of the co-op movement, because this is where they get put into practice. And when we think about ecosystems, it's about cooperation amongst cooperatives, isn't it? It's how you make that happen. So you've either got that brilliant, lovely picture we saw at the beginning that the colleagues put together in Greece, but also it's about working together. It's about Asako working with a number of local producers. It's about all sorts of cooperation among cooperatives. We can build local ecosystems or bigger, more global ones. And when we think about the principles and when we think about the values, it takes me on to a second part of my argument, really, which is that it's the unique nature of cooperatives that enables us to think about how they have a great chance of success in terms of being part of and helping to develop and promote ecosystems. And again, I'm not going to read through all of those things, but I think what it does when we look at this, or some of those words and some of those ideas, it reminds us about what's unique about cooperatives. And it does take us back to what Ian Macpherson wrote about cooperative learning. Cooperatives are really important for two main reasons. A, they're a business, so that they can be effective, impactful businesses and great enterprises that are fair, taking us back to our early word, but their great importance lies in their associational aspects. In other words, how that brings people together, individuals and organisations. And what it does in particular is help us to develop together not only that cooperative identity, but those skills and knowledge that are relevant for the movement. And again, that was so strongly made in one of the opening comments. What we're at, I think, in the co-op movement is at the cusp of rethinking what skills and knowledge is needed, not simply for ecosystems, but equally for brilliant, authentic and meaningful and fair cooperatives. We can't just assume cooperatives are good because they've got nice words. How do we actually evidence that they work, and how do we actually make sure they benefit as many people as possible? But there's no doubt to me that one of the ways we need to think about them is as whole social organisations. And when we start thinking of the co-op as a whole social organisation, in other words, as you learn to do cooperation, you learn to be a cooperator, you learn to know the world, and you learn to live together. And you do that through the values and principles. So think about it. The cooperative itself, the cooperative movement is actually, promotes this idea of whole social organisations. So we're already thinking about ecosystems just because of the way we are as cooperators. And just as a health check, you probably know all these figures, but one of the reasons why we can be optimistic, I think, just have an update, a check on our most recent figures. 12% of people on Earth are in a cooperative. That's a lot of people. There's other figures there that you'll be very familiar with. They generate jobs, they've got huge turnovers, they're increasingly across so many sectors. But I think what's really important as well as that bottom point is the way that cooperatives are now, as you will know, are recognised by the UN as significant actors in development. So they are critically about not simply poverty alleviation, but about wealth creation. They are absolutely critical to how we make better worlds for ourselves. And that is a very important way of thinking about our ecosystem. So let me just conclude really by just saying something about your themes. And, you know, I think each one of your themes is exactly right for trying to think and tease out and test what this ecosystem idea is, and how the co-op movement in itself is an ecosystem, and how the cooperative model in itself lends itself to that. Some of the work at the Cooperative College, some of you will know, and the picture at the bottom is my colleague Sarah Aldred, who is currently working on projects in Rwanda. You know, a lot of our work is about working with on-the-ground groups to think about inclusion, to address exactly that, to think about women and young people in particular, to making sure that through their own work, of course, that, you know, where we can to support, to make sure that inclusion is absolutely, you know, a critical part of how the cooperative movement and model develops. And, you know, it's hard all over the world. It's challenging for the cooperative movement to be actually as inclusive as it might like to be. I think we've made great progress working with young people and women. I think we've made less progress working with people with disabilities, which I notice is one of the bullet points in your consideration. But efforts are being made certainly to address cooperative membership. What does that mean in terms of the cooperative ecosystem? How do you actually get people active? You know, we have big problems in the UK. You know, you've got everybody signs up. It's £1, £1 English pound. We're signed up. We never see them again. Okay, so what does it mean? How do we actually make people active? And there's lots of ways of trying to do that, sometimes through education, of course, but also acknowledging, as you are doing, and that's what's, I mean, it's so brilliant reading through the papers, looking at new ways of leading cooperatives, looking at emerging cooperatives. So we've got our traditional movement, but of course, what's coming over the horizon? And it was great last night being on a call with the University of Mondragon to see that the Cooperative University Kenya was actually a partner in that initiative. That's about platform co-ops. So, you know, it's this notion of being open to what's coming. That's how an ecosystem works. Of course, in terms of climate change and sustainability, this, you know, we're actually at an extraordinary moment, I think. We are seeing the small producer as being in some of the literature, whether that be the World Bank or the UN, being identified as new pioneers of sustainable growth. We're seeing, as you can see from some of those images, and that one at the bottom that's the number of people who are involved in energy co-ops now in the UK. It's massive. So the co-op movement is leading on a lot of this, but just think about that wider context. It's recognising, and the comment was made before about the flowers being flown to Europe, but how you procure locally, you know, how you challenge climate change and climate crisis by looking locally, by trying to develop local economies. Not always easy. Not straightforward, but I think it's interesting in the context of your conference and your thinking that there is a global move towards things like degrowth, and perhaps most critically, even, and I will say even, people at the World Bank saying, you know what, maybe GDP isn't the best way to measure how a country is progressing. You know, after all these years, you know, maybe we need to think of other measurements like well-being, equity, all those sorts of things. So there's something going on here. And, you know, there's no doubt that there are interesting ways that co-ops, really great ways that co-ops can challenge some of the great crises, and one of them, of course, being climate change. Cooperatives of the future, I mentioned the platform model before, but also what we are seeing, and it's partly, if I'm blunt, certainly speaking from a global north point of view, a lot of this is because the old model of work and is broken down. So what we have is people, finding new ways of working, finding new ways of organising the economy. Sometimes that's forced, and we have a big issue, and I'm sure it's the same in Kenya, of forced self-employment. So with that comes precarity and, informality. But there are also increasingly people coming into the cooperative model to actually try and offer and work through some of the services that a humanity needs. And, we've got examples, and I know it's the same globally, of housing cooperatives in particular. So how do we make for sustainable housing, mutual self-help, so that, people are living in better housing conditions? And also, and most recently, and I've been working with this group in the UK, we've got a new care co-op, Equal Care, which is actually really, it's a platform co-op, and it's trying to address some of the health inequalities. So, there's transport, there's manufacturing, there's building. What's really interesting about co-ops globally is that they are starting to be in sectors that they never were before. And when you think about our model of the ecosystem, that is really exciting. That gives us lots of potential. And then your final theme, in some ways, one of the things that's great about the co-op movement, but one of the things that's really challenging about the co-op movement is money. So we know, don't we, that there are sensible cooperators are saying, okay, I don't really get this co-op platform thing, but I need to find out about it. And what we are starting to get, and certainly in the global north, is people saying, well, we need to try and capture back, to take back some of the power in how work's gone. So it's not going to the big organisations, but that will actually try and work through, make this digital economy work for us. And that's a challenge, because you need money to do that. So of course, as an enabler, then it's how we actually try and work towards and keep building on enablers of cooperatives, not least credit and banking that are amenable and open. And of course, again, you lead the way with your SACCO model. We have credit unions in the UK, which aren't that dissimilar. They have a membership base, but those enablers, whether that be technology through to finance, and blended finance, and how they develop a sustainable entrepreneurship, are challenges for the movement, but I think are starting to be embraced. And I take us to the final slide, really. This is a bit of a mishmash, but I did want to say something about the prospects and challenges about the ecosystem idea. Okay, I'm an idealist and I'm a utopian, and I want a better world, and I think all cooperators, everyone in this room, wants those things as well, but nobody's saying it's easy. But what I've tried to suggest in this short presentation is, I think there are elements of the cooperative model and the cooperative movement and cooperatives on the ground that actually lend themselves to ecosystem approaches. Now, that's partly about the values and principles, in other words, the behaviours, but it's also about the associationalism that takes place as cooperatives work with other cooperators. But I think we're also, because of these external contexts, starting to see a shift in interest in co-ops. Now, okay, the quote I've given there is from Cooperative, and that's a European apex organisation for worker cooperatives. But what we're clearly seeing in sectors that I've said that haven't been cooperatised before, a growing interest in not simply co-ops using technology, but the idea of working towards a fair automation and being more attracted to that model. And the slip down the middle is, interestingly, these are a set of skills that are put out there for what might be the skills of the future. Now, I'm a work sociologist. That's my background. I'm fascinated by the history and experience of work, and it was really good to hear one of the people who spoke earlier in the introductory remarks talking about experiential learning. That list of skills there, when we think about, well, what's the future going to be, is pretty unknowable, but we do know that we need those skills. And actually, that doesn't matter whether you're working in a platform co-op or working in a manufacturing base or working in agriculture as a primary producer. We are going to increasingly need these skills. And I think what's interesting is there's almost a global consensus on what those skills are, regardless of where you're coming from. So that could be anything from UNESCO to the World Bank, to the International Cooperative Alliance, probably to local governments. And it's about being open to different ways of working and different ways of learning. Acquiring those skills, which we probably all do anyway, because it's based on our experience and our being. But these are seen increasingly as the skills that we will need for the future. So what are the challenges? In conclusion, it's not good ending on a bad note, but we have to be honest. Just because we all think corporation's a great idea, it doesn't mean it's always going to work. And what history has shown us is that there are often problems with cooperatives when we talk about scaling up. So whilst we can see a continued innovation and continued good ethics in small organisations, where you've got active engagement and active membership, and people who really care about the thing, once they start getting bigger, they become more challenging. They lose the roots that they originally had, and that has been, there's been a lot of research done about that. I think one of the interesting things about ecosystem co-ops, and certainly platform co-ops, is a lot of the ones that have been starting in the US and in continental Europe are small, and they tend to be, small scale. So there's no doubt there becomes a problem when you have the sizing up, that cooperative identity can be lost, and there can be some challenges. The second problem, of course, is access to finance. That is always a problem, because even though we recognise this, what we can call a turn towards new ways of working and thinking, it's very hard to secure finance for cooperative startups, and that can be in the richest countries in the world. It's very, very challenging. Some countries are more empathetic than others, but overall, you're a startup. So, how do you, one of the ways that you can think about doing that, of course, is to continue to support generative cooperative finance, whether that be cooperative banks. We've got new cooperative banks starting, and community banks starting in our local ecosystems in the UK, because we're building on local assets. So, who's got money locally? I don't like to say this university, but it's usually the universities and local governments. So actually, can we borrow based on that? There's lots of creative ways that cooperatives are looking at developing local financial support and infrastructure. And I think the final point I want to make is, what our research shows us is where cooperatives often fail, or one of their greatest challenges, is when, as I alluded to earlier, they no longer have that active engagement. They lose that notion of identity and belonging, which is often the key. So, in conclusion, there's, an overview, if you like, of, I think, how we are working towards ecosystems in cooperative contexts. There are some challenges, but I think the sort of conference that you're holding today is one that can only enhance and make the prospects for that, real. So congratulations. I really wish I was there, and I'm so excited to learn about what you're doing. So again, thank you very much indeed for the invite.
Let's all appreciate Dr. Sila Rose again. Dr. Rose, we just want to really thank you for your presentation, and very informative. And I think at this point now, I would want to do what we normally do at the beginning, because I think now the participants in this room will appreciate your biodata better, given that they have already listened to you. We just had a keynote speech from Dr. Sila Rose, who is the principal of the Cooperative College, UK, and works in higher education, community and adult education. She has worked extensively across the UK and has led interdisciplinary blended learning and research initiatives internationally. Sila is currently exploring a cooperative university in the UK, a union co-op, and is associated with the Greater Manchester Cooperative Commission. She is also exploring new ways of thinking about cooperative learning for livelihoods and decent work. And I'm sure there are researchers in here who would like to link up with Dr. Sila Rose so that we can see how we can explore partnerships between the researchers in Kenya and in the UK. Sila was also a commissioner or the Centenary Commissioner on Adult Education in 2019 and has recently been appointed to a 3-year honorary professorship in cooperative education at the University of Nottingham in the UK. So that is our keynote speaker this morning, who has ably presented the keynote address on cooperatives in a changing ecosystem. She has talked about global disruptions, looking at inequalities, both locally and globally. Was talked about global instability, disruptive technologies that come into play. She has talked about tools for a cooperative ecosystem, and in particular, the key ingredient in such tools, basically fairness being the key driver, fair play, fair housing, fair markets, fair funds, and also has ably talked about cooperatives as a social organization, and in particular focusing on cooperation among cooperatives. And most importantly for us, she has tied together the sub-themes of our conference, remembering climate change or sustainability, cooperatives of the future, and enablers of cooperatives. And finalized or completed our discussion with the prospects and challenges, and particularly pointing out the fact that the technology is attracting the youth into cooperatives. Now, in this country, we've been talking about how do we bring the youth into the cooperative movement. And I think Dr. Rose has ably told us how we can go about this, and in particular, the use of technology in attracting the youth into the cooperative movement. With this, I don't know if there is a quick reaction or comment from the audience for Dr. Rose before, while we still have her. A comment, a question that Dr. Rose could respond to. Anybody? Anyone? Yes, you will introduce yourself maybe and then ask the question. Is she able to see who is asking the question, Doctor?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Rose. Dr. Ross, not Rose. It was a very powerful presentation. In fact, whatever you've given us is what is happening to our country locally. And we highly appreciate a number of issues, especially relating to the social care and health. Things we shouldn't take for granted, like the pandemic. And I think you've touched on almost everything, and I'm very excited because it's all relevant to what the conference is all about. And it is going to give us a guide as to how we will handle the next session. So thank you very much. We highly appreciate.
Thank you for that comment. We have time for one more question before we move into the panel discussion. Comment? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Ken Babu, a student at the Cooperative University of Kenya, and I've heard you mention something to do with the youths, how you should include the youths in cooperative management. I would like to stress that on that point of youths, it should be taken with much seriousness, because that is one of the problems we are suffering as a nation today. And so, Dr. Rose, I appreciate that you recognize the presence of the youths, and it should be taken with much seriousness. Thank you.
And I think at this point now I would like us to move to our next session, which is a panel discussion. Dr. Ross, you are most welcome to
So delegates, we move now into the next session. And in this session, we will be looking at, we are going to a panel discussion. In the panel discussion, we have a panel of 6 members. 2 members are with us here and the moderator. The rest are expected to join virtually. In terms of introduction, I will leave that to the moderator to introduce the panel. But I will introduce the moderator, who is Steve Otieno from the Cooperative Alliance of Kenya. So I will kindly request the moderator and the 2 panel members to come in front. The 2 panel members will sit here, and the moderator will sit here. So welcome. So in this session, I will then leave the moderator to take charge.
Hello? Hello? Cooperative University Conference amidst the new to having this earlier of but here we are today. We have a panel of and here, starting with the Kenya Cooperative. She's now senior citizen of wealth and will be sharing this morning. Also with us is from Kisumu County. We have Gideon Oduol, who is actually the Director of Cooperatives or Commissioner, the County Commissioner for Cooperatives in Kisumu. Joining us also online will be Professor Esther Gishero, who is Deputy Vice Chancellor here at the Cooperative University. We are also expecting to be joined by Mark Matabi, who is the country representative of WOKU. We are also going to have the Commissioner for Cooperative Development, Mr. Joe. So probably those who are here. Yeah. Mark Matabi is already with us. Thank you. Maybe the first question I'm going to put to Lucy. What are some of the disruptions? Because I think this is something Dr. Rose has actually talked about shortly in her keynote address. What are some of the disruptions in the agricultural cooperatives that are emerging and the emerging issues in the agriculture cooperatives? Specifically, of course, Dr. Rose has talked about climate change, which again, probably you can actually look at it from the Kenyan context, issues of technological and marketing issues in agricultural cooperatives.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for having me here as a panelist. And agriculture being our main, the backbone of our economy, it's very, very key in our sector. And the smallholder farmer contributes the bigger responsibility of ensuring that we are fed and we have secure livelihoods. So there are a number of disruptions that I'll mention. Dr. Ross set the pace. There's digital disruption. There's the climate change. And I think that has really affected us. I'll elaborate a little bit on the climate area. The weather patterns, for example. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, thank you. The weather patterns, for example, where we have excess rainfall, unreliable rainfall, we have shortages, we have high temperatures, the climate change generally. This has affected our productivity, our food security, resulting to low incomes, insecure livelihoods, among so many other things. So we are talking of the climate impacting negatively on our people. The issue is how prepared are we to manage the climate crisis. Other disruptions include inequalities, We have issues of poverty, those who have and those who don't have. We have gender inequality. We have issues of corruption. Let's face it. We have challenges of skills and knowledge. Long are the days when we used to have extension services. We are dealing with a farmer who is not educated, a farmer who is not aware of how he's supposed to handle or to have the best agricultural practices. We have issues of building trust and morality, among other things, competition, markets. And our biggest challenge, I think, starts with skills and knowledge. Our cooperative is as strong or as sustainable as the members are well knowledgeable, well informed, so that number one, they can participate in the production, and number two, they can elect leadership that will drive the society to sustainable levels. There are those other issues, disruptions, especially the global instability. We have the markets, we have the political and legal issues, and especially as we operate in a devolved system. So there are quite a number of disruptions, moderator, and unless we address all these issues and we come up with ways of ensuring that our cooperatives are sustainable in this particular environment, which I'll elaborate further, I think our cooperatives will become irrelevant if we are not careful. If you look at some of the marketing cooperatives like those in coffee, if I narrow down to coffee cooperatives, you find there's a lot of instability. Many of them have high levels of indebtedness. The production has really gone down. From 130,000 metric tons, we are talking of below 40,000. And all this is because there are issues ranging from production all the way to the market. And that is what has really weakened our cooperative societies because of low productivities, splitting of societies to uneconomical units, and also governance issues. We are happy to have the cooperative university that trains some of those management leadership. But I think as we move forward, that needs to be properly coordinated so that we have minimum requirements for office bearers. We have leadership skills gaps that need to also be addressed. So we are calling upon even the university to come up with a curriculum for even the lower people within the cooperative movement. Even as you become you're already a university, when you are a college, you used to have those trainings that need to also to be enhanced even at the cooperative level. We have the youth. Most of them are not interested in farming. That is, we have an aged farmer, an average age of 60 or 59, they're now talking of 59, 58. How do we interest our young people so that they participate in agricultural activities? How do we make it interesting? How do we ensure that the value chain, not just the production, but the processing, manufacturing, value addition, is also taken care of? How do we ensure we produce for the market so that whatever we are producing is market-driven? And our cooperatives have to style up in a digital world, in a market that is very sensitive now even to agrochemicals. Everybody is looking for organic produce. So there are so many things that we need to do to ensure that our cooperative societies, the agri-based cooperative societies, remain relevant, they are sustainable, they give results to their members. And most of it all starts with education. Can we bring back training?
counties had enacted their own cooperative policies and even legislation. One case in point is Meru County. The National Cooperative Development Policy was approved last year by the Cabinet in October. Where does this leave those counties? Do you still believe we need to have county-level policies and legislations?
Thank you so much, Mr. Steve Otieno, our moderator, for the question. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I want to appreciate the KCU University for inviting me to this conference. Now, I want to start by appreciating the fact that devolution has been seen in counties, and the effect of devolution is being felt in a cooperative sector as well as other sectors. Now, when it comes to policy, the National Cooperative Development Policy, as he has mentioned, was approved last year in 2019. I'm also happy to hear that some counties, as he has mentioned, Meru, have a policy in place at county level. I'm also aware of other counties, to mention Kisumu, Vihiga, Kakamega, Siaya, Homa Bay, and a few others whom I have not confirmed, but they have done what we call draft county cooperative development policy at county level. Most of these drafts have not become operational at the county level for a few reasons. One, some of them do not pass the cabinet sitting, which is supposed to be part of the approval process. Others have stuck at the county assembly, also for other reasons. But despite the fact that these ones have got stuck, and even others have gone through, if I'm to confirm, most of these policies may not be operational and work well due to the fact that others could have been done without considering the National Cooperative Development Policy. The two policies, that is county level and the national level, are supposed to work in tandem so that there's no conflict when they are operational at whichever level. I want to mention that as we look at the national policy, which is a four-chapter document, it has 4 chapters, and the first and second chapters are almost the same in almost all the aspects of even the counties. But I want to point specifically at Chapter 3 of the National Cooperative Development Policy. Chapter 3, it mentions that devolved structures which are distinct but are interdependent should conduct their affairs in a mutual basis of cooperation and consultation. So most of these county cooperative policy documents we have, most of them, I believe, did not do what we call the mutual consultation with the national policy. And therefore, we need to look at them so that we address the emerging issues and any other issue that might come up so that they run in line with what is in the national policy. Now, it also mentions in that part, number 3, at the policy intervention, that the interventions prescribed will be implemented by both levels of government in accordance with Chapter 186 under the 4th schedules of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And the specific functions have been mentioned there and assigned to each level of government. Now, when you come down to our counties, this is an area that needs a lot of sensitization, because I don't know how many of our people at whichever level at the county are conversant with this schedule, with Chapter 186. So as mentioned, we need to sensitize. As we need to sensitize our members. County cooperative policies which are already in place can be realigned with the national county development policy so that they work in tandem with one another without conflict. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bwana Oduol. The issue of the policy has been quite contentious for quite a long while. Having been part of the team that worked on the national cooperative policy, I know even some development agencies have been having quite a lot of concerns with regard to the fact that cooperatives are devolved. And one of the things probably we need to start thinking about, Bwana Oduol, is now that the BBI is suggesting, and this one is actually not being contested, the increase of the budgetary allocation from 15% to 35%. Of course, in agriculture, there's also the suggestion for the introduction of extension services for all. How do we position cooperatives in light of the increased funding that is coming to the counties?
Thank you for the question. I have not personally read what is there in the BBI, but as a matter of policy, if you look at our cooperative movement, I would wish again to refer you to the National Cooperative Development Policy. And for a quick summary, I just refer you to the 4th chapter. The 4th chapter is concerned about institutional implementation framework, the framework that should be used to implement this policy. And at number 4.9, it talks about there should be an intergovernmental coordinating unit. Thank you. It talks about there should be an intergovernmental or intergovernment coordinating unit. I think if we had, that would be one of the biggest success for this conference. If we can come up and say, what would be the role of this intergovernmental coordinating unit? What would be the composition? What would be their task? And in this, I think a task force comprising of, probably because I believe there's still room for additional material in the BBI, a task force comprising of CAK, institutions of learning like this one and others, non-governmental organizations, county governments, and all other people can be formed and be given a task to perform within a given time framework, so that these issues and agenda of cooperative movement can also be included in the BBI. Because I believe there is still room for us to come in as a sector, given that the cooperative policy is very clear that there should be an intergovernmental coordinating unit. Otherwise, The ones that we have at counties, I've been able to look at the one for Kisumu because I was part of it, the people who are working on it with my colleague there. My friend from used to be at Global Communities. There is no mention of how the national government would come in when it comes to implementing these policies. And I believe even those countries which have done theirs, this was something that was left out. So let us look at the policy, the room that the cooperative policy, national cooperative, gives us to have an intergovernment coordinating unit, and then let this unit also be inculcated in the BBI. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bwana Oduol. It's unfortunate we are not going to have the commissioner with us here. We had hoped that you would actually join us virtually because the issue of the implementation of the policy is actually long overdue. Because when you look at the time frame which was actually captured for implementation, it was supposed to run for 3 years. And if the policy was passed in October last year, and a number of people at the county level have not been acquainted to this policy as yet, then I think there's need for serious action, particularly from the State Department for Cooperatives, to work on this. Or alternatively, we need to look at who else can help us to drive this, because counties need to do what they ought to do. And if that is not being done from the national government, then counties probably may actually drive it by themselves. Mark Matabi, how are you? Karibu sana. I know Mark has been very passionate about service cooperatives. And I think that is actually one area where we're going to see more young people moving into the new normal. Why emergency of service cooperative business models as such as transport cooperatives, health cooperatives? Of course, I've been in discussion about health cooperatives together with Professor Sheru and Giorgio Toto. Where are we moving towards with service cooperatives? Yes, Mark. Mark, can you get us? He's on mute.
Hi, thank you so much. You can hear me, Steve?
Very well.
Thank you so much, everyone, for this opportunity you have given me. If you will not mind, Steve, if you can just come up with your question again so that I can be able to get it clearly.
We are looking at the service cooperatives. How the emergence of service cooperatives, which direction do you think they need to take? We are looking at transport cooperatives, health cooperatives, energy cooperatives, etc. I know you are part of the team that came up with Funditech as a service cooperative.
Thank you so much, Bwana Moderator Steve, and thank you so much, CUK, for this opportunity you have given to us, at least to share some nuggets of wisdom around the issues of the service cooperative. As you all know, this year's theme is all about cooperatives in the changing ecosystem. And let's face it, there are a number of things which we are trying to see how best maybe the cooperative can be able to be applied, the cooperative model can be able to apply in our context. And as we all agree, cooperatives are very important models that can actually be able to help us advance as a society, both socially and even economically. First of all, I want to put across that in the changing environment, there are the service cooperatives, the introduction and even strengthening of service cooperative in Kenya at the moment is something that should be taken with the all seriousness that is required. One, because there are three elements which I want to put across. Why do we need to introduce more and even strengthen service cooperatives in this country? Number one is the changing economic structure and system of our nation. As you all know, the cooperative here began much more or less specifically in agriculture production and marketing sector. All along before even as we introduced the cooperative movement in a century ago. Everything was around agriculture production and marketing. Later on, the need of the issue of credit came in, and that's why you saw the introduction and today the well-spoken circle movement in this particular country. Because of the need of also around housing, we have also strongly the issue of housing cooperatives in the country. Now people will be able to ask, what next? Because traditional now we got three types of major cooperatives: the agriculture, housing, and savings and credit. Now, my proposition, which many of us who have agreed, is can we now have a departure? Because the economic structure of this country is trying to change very rapidly. Today, the service industry is really becoming the center stage of our national GDP. And it's very apparent that actually based on that, if at all the cooperative will be able to continually remain relevant, then the cooperative model should be introduced to serve the service sector, so that at least those who are in service sector can be able to use the cooperative model to offer services to this country and contribute to the economic environment. Number 2 point, apart from the economic structure, we got also some gaps in the existing three types of cooperatives: agriculture cooperatives, savings and credit cooperatives. We also have gaps in even housing cooperatives. And these gaps are actually more or less service oriented. When, for example, if you go in agriculture cooperatives, we got, as Madam mentioned, around the issue of the issue of extension services. Extension services in agriculture sector is a big deal. That means it jeopardizes and even erodes the application of the cooperative model in agriculture sector. So what that, for instance, we have agronomists forming service cooperatives who eventually can be able to serve agriculture produce and marketing cooperatives. When we move to housing cooperative, the issue of architectural services, the issue of construction services, we have had issues of short works in the cooperatives, in housing cooperative. We have construction workers, we have fundis. If fundis were able to form a service cooperative and they work hand in hand to fill the gaps in the housing cooperative, I think it will be one of the critical things. When we come to savings and credit cooperatives, we have gaps around accounting, we have gaps around the audit, we have gaps around the issues of ICT. If at all we got services around ICT, forming cooperatives and they're using cooperative model to offer ICT services, accounting services, even HR services to savings and credit cooperative, that means we can be able to strengthen those cooperatives. So eventually, that's a second point. Finally, the issue of inclusivity. As Madam also mentioned, the cooperative movement in this country has been so much identified with all the people. And so the best way to introduce youth into the cooperative space, as where we are sitting, because they don't have means of production, it will be much more if at all we promoted and strengthened service cooperatives in this particular country. So those three major parameters will be a very good basis for us to have service cooperatives in the space in this particular country. I just want to challenge the participants who are here today. We are having some we are having challenges, especially when it comes to the employee-based circles. Assuming we had workers who are at Nakumat, workers who are in the Tuskies, workers who are at a point served in some of those defunct kind of cooperatives, thinking along the way beyond maybe the aspect of savings and credit, and maybe thinking to have their own lines of business as a cooperative. I think most of them, they should be they will be continuing to have some decent jobs, having their own maybe stores and so on and so forth. So basically, that is the premise upon which we could be able to look into an aspect of service. At the same time also, I want also to challenge the participant. The issue of the cooperative identity and principles, it's very, very critical. One of the things that are actually moving forward and we can be able to advance the discussion, it's very important that we need to do a lot of awareness creation so that people can be able to understand the types of cooperatives that we need to have in place, rather than bring a lot of confusion. We have had a lot of confusion in the cooperative movement, and that's a fact. We need to face it, where there is no way I could be able to refer to a transport service cooperative as a transport circle, for instance. And that has been a big challenge, and I will really want to challenge even the people in the policy space to make some of these things to be very much straightforward, moving forward, so that at least we need to know. There's no way you can be able to have something like a matatu circle, because in most cases, and this is a fact, I thank God I'm very far, most of those even circles, matatu circles, the people who are owning the so-called matatu circles, they don't even have a matatu. They have just formed those things just to attract and have roots in that particular regard. And so it is very, very important, as this, even as we try to promote various types of circles, we are very cognizant, we are very conscious of the ideals and the identity of the cooperative. I wrote a paper around the cooperative identity, and those are some of the things that actually I was talking about, where people are confusing. You realize today even people calling farmers a farmers circle, and sometimes it's so much irritating when you see even the leader fraternity. They need to be trained on how even to address some of the issue around cooperative identity, to understand that there are different types of cooperatives and they got different objectives based on the sectors they are in.
Thanks.
So basically, colleagues, those are some of my key sentiments I wanted just to raise as well as now. Thank you.
Very well. Mark. Particularly on transport circles, sometimes last year, I think we came up with transport cooperatives, bylaw and regulations. Again, this falls back to the State Department for Cooperatives. They need to actually actualize that, because the transport circles are not circles, as it were. They are transport cooperatives. But maybe on just a quick one, with regard to the image of the cooperatives and specifically circles, with regard to what the President alluded to earlier, sometimes last week, that he was somewhere and he met these border people who are members of a circle, and he told them he'd like to give them some money into their circle. And they said no. But because he gave them the alternative, that if I put the money in your circle, I'll give you more money. But if you want me to give you money to share, I'll give you little. And they opted to be given the little money rather than to be given more money through their circle. What does that reflect with regard to the image, particularly of youth cooperative societies? Mark. Is it there? Matabi. Unmute yourself. Mark.
Okay, thank you so much, Steve. I was on mute. I was muted by the guys on the deck. I think that's a very critical that's a very critical question, Steve. And I think it all boils down again, as the first speaker, Madam, mentioned. There is a lot to do, especially around awareness creation for cooperative, and this is one of the things that actually we should be able to look at and see, because even in the current discussion around the BBI, the issues of SME is being talked a lot, and many people are not trying to discuss maybe inside it. Even and this platform or this forum would be very vital for us to even debunk the SME at the world level. The SMEs in the world, could they take the form of cooperatives, for instance? So that at least people can understand that, okay, cooperative. So that at least now in that particular regard, they can be much more viable, they can be able to attract even tenders and so on and so forth. And so I think what the president experienced was, and it also a lot that we have not done well, especially in terms of awareness creation, sensitization of our youth currently around the various models they can be able to run various enterprises they got. And one of the vital model we could be able to go out there and try to make sure that they understand comprehensively the identity, the principle, the values that we got in the cooperative movement, that is the best way to serve them, as Madam Dr. Rose mentioned, the issue of everyone for all and each for all and all for each will be a very vital issue for us actually to be very cognizant. So to me, I think the issue here, it shows clearly that our youth, even if they are in so-called the border circles and so on and so forth, they have not even been clearly been educated, clearly been sensitized to understand the way the cooperatives model work for them. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
I've seen Professor Gisheru online. Prof, are you there? Professor Gisheru? Hi, Prof, how are you? Just
I'm very fine.
Fantastic.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Well,
Okay.
Professor, welcome to the conference. My first question to you is, what are the disruptions in the cooperative education sector? Or what are the emerging issues in the cooperative education and training in Kenya? And specifically, are there adequate human capacity, particularly at master's and PhD level, focusing on cooperatives? And what is CUK doing, both in terms of face-to-face and virtual learning? And are there innovations and technologies driven by research at the Center of Cooperative Development, such as iProof and coin circles? And then what is the level of partnerships amongst cooperatives and or other stakeholders to support member education and training?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I apologize, I'm doing the meeting late. Yeah, because we happen to be in another conference, and so there are some conflicting interests. I'm happy that I'm here, and I've been listening to my colleagues as they were responding to some of the issues that you have raised. Now, coming to the issues of cooperative education and training, first of all, before I come to the specific question, let me say that this is a very important area in the development of cooperatives. And if you look back, you feel that as to how cooperatives have evolved, right from when the first cooperatives were registered, the next thing that was done is also to establish cooperative training institutions, because without training, education and training in cooperatives cannot, cannot take food. They cannot take a good foundation, and that is why these institutions were established all over the countries, not just here in Kenya, to ensure that as we develop cooperatives, people are well sensitized to understand the nature, the philosophy, and how cooperatives work. So cooperative education and training is very key. And even when I heard Mr. Matabi talking about the borders and the way the president was talking, yeah, it's because of lack of this sensitization and education that people would choose give us money on our own as individuals rather than saying give us money as cooperatives. So cooperative education and training is very, very important. And talking of disruptions in the development sector, at the emerging issues, Yeah, of course, now during this era of COVID-19, there have been unusual disruptions. Yeah, in that now the fact that people cannot meet face-to-face. So the kind of training and education we would give through our cooperatives has been disrupted. If you look at the cooperative institutions, let's say the cooperative societies, savings and credit, the marketing cooperatives and all cooperatives, this year we have not been able to do or to carry out education to our members effectively. And like I have said, without educating members, you end up with institutions that are really not member driven, but probably driven by the leaders. And when cooperatives are driven by the leaders without bringing along the members, they may choose to be true cooperatives. So the kind of disruptions that have taken place, you remember we started with the closure of educational institutions, and even the cooperative university was not spared. Without training, we cannot go far. So we look at training, even in the circles, for example, we're trying to come up with ways of reaching out to our members, even when we are not meeting face-to-face. For example, in my circle the other day, we had a delegates forum where we carried out information, we gave them information as to what is happening, but we had to do that through Zoom. And then the question they were asking is, how do we reach out to members? Because we as delegates, yes, we have come, but members, we have not been able to reach out to them. And so we are still devising ways of how we can reach out to the members themselves, because that is where the issues lie. Without reaching out to the grassroots and identifying what is needed, our cooperatives will not do well. So when we talk about human capacity in cooperatives, whether it is I would say that since we started offering training at the cooperative and went to the cooperative college, we found out many diploma holders and you can know those who are good for that time because they were able to help the growth and development of cooperatives as supervisors and even workers in those cooperatives. But as cooperatives diversified, then we needed also to develop educational programs that suit the current characters of those cooperatives. And that is why the Cooperative University in the year 2005 collaborated with the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology to develop a degree program in cooperative business. That was the first one that we started, and it was only after that that we were able to have degree holders who are trained in cooperatives. Before that, people working in cooperatives at that level would only have come through experience. But when we sent out our first degrees, degree holders in cooperative business, that now paved the way of training at higher levels at the university. But talking about whether the capacity is adequate, I want to say that the capacity is not adequate. You can see that we are very new in that field of training at higher levels. And after we started running the degree programs, then it was 2012 when we started the master's programs in cooperative management. And so we have only graduated one cohort in that area. So you can see they are not enough. university has been doing is to try to tap who have done degree in cooperative business and those who have done masters in cooperative management, the best performing, we don't let them go, we retain them at the university so that they can be developed further, even up to PhD level. And the university is now working very hard to ensure that we come up with our first degree program, not at the doctoral level, our first PhD program in cooperative management, and it is now at an advanced stage. We are actually just waiting for the Senate to approve it so that it can be taken to the Commission for University Education. And this will really help us because it is going to help us to produce trainers who are well versed in cooperatives to train those people who are undertaking degree programs and master's programs and even PhD in cooperatives. Actually, we have been really struggling. There are many times we have even advertised we have advertised for positions in cooperative area and we don't get them. So we keep on repeating and repeating. So we hope that now this move the university has taken, it will help us to turn out more graduates in this area. Most of our graduates earlier on were going to undertake their PhD programs at our sister college in Moshi, the Cooperative University of Moshi, and I think produce our own. Our cooperative movement is very advanced compared to these other countries in Africa. So it is only good when our students study in our country, because when it comes to the classical experience, we are more advanced. So now, tracking with the way the university has also responded in these changing times, we had to act very quickly and very fast in the university to ensure that our students are not left very behind. Because when COVID-19 came, we thought it was going to be a short-lived thing, and therefore we waited. I think we wasted about a month thinking that maybe things will come back to normal and we come back. But when we saw things were not coming back to normal, we invested in ICT infrastructure, and we were able to bring on board our students, especially those who are just about to complete the program in readiness for graduation. So those ones were brought back, they were trained, we even conducted examinations for them, and those ones are now ready. Those who are going to make it during the assessment, they are going to be ready for the graduation. As we move on, we also decided also to bring in even those who are not finalists, the continuing students, and also started teaching them online. And despite the difficulties that we underwent at the beginning, I would like to say that we are almost now mastering it, and our lecturers are able to offer these programs online. I can see that now the level of confidence and the level of acceptability has improved, and so we are moving on quite well. As the Cabinet Secretary the other day also announced that universities can now open for face-to-face learning, we have also been looking into that, trying to go through all the requirements in terms of the protocols to be observed, and we admitted or recorded back our students on in-house learning. First of all, what we started with was those finalists who are not able to get online when we were teaching them online, because there were some challenges and some of them could not join. So as a result of that, we called them to come so that we can quickly take them through what the others learned online, and be able to do their examinations so that come December when the others are graduating, they can also graduate. And I believe now we are done with that. And so we are just now waiting for the examinations to be finalized. So we also have called the others that we had taught the continuing students. They have also gone through their examinations. I think they are going through now, they just concluded. And so I would say that we have graded very well. But even those students who came to the university, we have not really started face-to-face learning. But we are trying to see how this goes on, especially with the insurgence of these cases of COVID-19. So even if they are in the university, the advantage is that they can access internet and they can join in the e-learning. And so I would say that in that area, very well to ensure that students are not disadvantaged and they are learning. Now, on the level of innovations and technology, yes, we have our cooperative development and research and innovation center, and this is the one that has even the organization of this conference, and with division in play. They are doing a lot of work with the cooperative, and we are really very happy in what they are doing. One of the things that they intend to do is also to establish an innovation hub, which they have been working towards. And I know some of these issues because when COVID-19 came, people were not really prepared, and many of the things were really slowed down. But they are on the right track in doing that, so that they can create an environment where cooperatives can come, maybe initiate their startup projects, which they can roll out to the rest of the people. Now, in doing all what we are doing, the university works very closely with our partners. Yeah, we have partners, we have stakeholders, and I'm in the same division of CDRI. We have been able to establish collaborations, also been able to sign MOUs even with the State Department of Cooperatives. We have signed with the SASRA, and the reason why we have signed these MOUs is to ensure that we can develop solutions which are relevant and which will be these organizations or these other institutions will have participated in identifying the needs that the universities would come out to solve. So we have quite a number of MOUs, as I have said, even with the civil society organizations, like global communities. Yeah, we've been working closely with them, and we are able to reach out to the cooperative movement through that partnership. And this is a very good move because the cooperative university is not working on its own. It is working with the industry that it is supposed to serve. And going forward and continue with this close relationship, the university is making itself very relevant in the industry and in the development of cooperatives. Yeah, so yeah, our moderator, I think for now, I can stop there.
Thanks. Maybe back to you. You really mentioned a lot in terms of where agricultural cooperatives need to go to. But then we need to have some very clear direction on what are your thoughts. because we are all aware that agriculture is the backbone of our economy. About 70% of the population in this country lives in the rural areas. By and large, they're actually small-scale producers. Many financial institutions, including SACCOs, are very skeptical with regard to accessing finance or providing financial services to smallholder producers. So which do you think would be the best way that we can remodel, particularly smallholder production, so that they can be attractive to financial institutions?
Thank you. I think the smallholder farmers and their cooperative societies that were formed purely to market their produce have remained primary. Why do I say that? Because even with liberalization and the entire economy moving forward, I think to some extent, even without talking about training, it's like they're going backwards, unfortunately. Where did we lose them? Number one, I think the farmers have been left alone to think for themselves without a lot of support. Number two, they rely so much on government support that they are not willing, according to the values of cooperatives, to have their self-help, self-dependence. They want to be supported. And that is why loan repayment becomes a challenge. Financial institutions will not finance people who are not willing to pay. Unfortunately, we can't go asking the many thousands of farmers for security. When it comes to repayment, if I can give an example of coffee cooperative societies, where they will borrow from their societies and they will divert proceeds to avoid loan repayment. So what do we need to do? A lot of training. We need them to trust even their leadership. We need them to be well educated on how to handle borrowing. There's a lot of money. SACCOs have money, banks have money, but it's very little that is trickling down other than what the government is giving because of certain social and cultural challenges that we need to overcome. One of the biggest challenges we have with those cooperatives, they are also dependent on smallholders. And with increased population, the holdings are getting even smaller, the productivity is going down, so their source of revenues is also diminishing. So what do we need to do? I think without ignoring our primary cooperatives, because they are very vital, they are key, as we work towards improving on their efficiency, increasing productivity through training, extension services, I'm happy that the county governments now are giving that as a priority. I think we need to think of new cooperatives in the agricultural sector. Can we have, where there is land, some kind of consolidation? We are having challenges in consistency in supply and quality of produce that we produce. If we had new cooperatives driven by maybe professionals, where we have large-scale farming, we can start thinking of food security. As it is right now, the cooperatives are challenged because of the holdings of land, and we need to have larger cooperative societies that can handle large production of food. We also need to have maybe new cooperative societies within the value chain. We can have cooperatives that are dealing with value addition, manufacturing, and distribution of produce. We have left this area to intermediaries, multinationals. Why can't cooperatives also stand up to bridge that gap between the producer and the consumer? I think we also need to have alternative markets. The gentleman has talked of service cooperatives. I think it's a high time we had a consumer cooperative, a national consumer cooperative that is supposed to at least support the farmers, bridge that gap between production and consumption. Workers' cooperatives. One of the biggest challenges we are having is labor in the rural areas. Can we have cooperatives that can provide labor on the farms so that the farmers don't have to go looking for laborers who are expensive? They work from morning till 1. They are paid over 300 shillings, and you give them lunch, and they do very little. So can we have cooperatives that can also provide that kind of service? Now, we also need to have a to pull together and position ourselves within global value chains as a country and take advantage of economies of scale. When we have the county governments, all of them having their policies and not coming together so that we can face other producing countries in the international market, we lose, because we lose the bargaining power at that level. So I think we need to scale up our production, diversify, commercialize our agricultural business. We become more competitive, and we only do that if we have entities that are viable, sustainable, and that can give results. Otherwise, we'll continue complaining of food security and poverty levels if we don't do something about it. Maybe the other thing I would want to request the university, as we form consumer cooperatives, we are coffee producers and we produce the best coffee in the world. We don't consume it. If we can have a barista training program, we are training the youth in coffee brewing, basic bookkeeping, customer care, basic procurement. We can have a franchise project where we have kiosks or outlets selling our coffee at reasonable prices, where we make nice coffee available to Kenyans, affordable, and we can take advantage of the local market instead of relying so much on external market. I like what the Deputy VC talked about. Why can't we buy our flowers? Why can't we drink our coffee? Why do we need all the time to produce for external market, much as we need the foreign exchange? We can also take advantage of the local market. So if we have a pulling effect from the market, even those primary cooperatives now that are struggling will start producing, because the farmers will look forward to being paid better prices. As it is, pricing is a challenge, the market is unreliable, and the farmers have no incentives even to go back to farming until they know whatever they're doing will give them some revenues. So it is a catch-22. Do we need to tell them to go back to production, or do we need first to organize ourselves and the markets so that we can tell them there is money in whatever you're doing? The coordination between the county and the national government. Challenges. If only we can sit together. We can work, for example, with the pastoralists. We can initiate irrigation programs in those areas, fertile areas, where we coexist, the pastoralists and the agrarians. And we can increase our production and share whatever it is with their livestock. So there is a lot that we can do. Of course, we need the blessing, the political goodwill. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's a political government, so we cannot divorce the two. But we need to think development, not at the level, at our level, but bottom up. A lot of decisions have been made top bottom, and by the time we get to the farmer is not interested. So we find we've done so much, implementation is zero, or because we didn't include the person who is supposed to drive the business, then they don't adopt to the recommendations that we give. So it has to be an all-inclusive partnership. We have to look at issues in a more holistic manner. It has to be market-driven, and we need to start thinking of diversification, we commercialize, and we become competitive, and we position ourselves in the global market.
Thanks a lot, Lucy.
Thank you.
Because of interest of time, I want to conclude with Oduola. Oduola, what needs to be done to pull all counties at the same pace? Because you mentioned a number of counties that have gone ahead and have already developed draft policies or legislations. But the other counties that are so far much behind, what do you think needs to be done? Who needs to trigger this so that we can have all counties working at the same pace to promote the cooperative business model?
First and foremost, we need to assess and understand the need for proper cooperative development policy. Because one thing that is coming out clear from the discussion we are having here is that the national cooperative development policy came in place at a given time. The counties did not have one at the onset. Some have developed theirs, some have not, and even the ones that have developed theirs, they are not using it. So we are asking ourselves, is this thing called policy necessary? Because they have been performing without it. The answer is, now we need to understand how far we have moved from what needs to be done, so that we can understand why this policy is very important and is needed. My first suggestion would be, we need the State Department for Cooperatives talk about the CS for that department to jumpstart or to implement the current national cooperative policy. If something is being done, whatever is being done should be done a little bit faster. If nothing is being done to implement the national cooperative development policy, then immediately work should begin on implementing this policy. As that goes on, that would also help the county governments to work on their policies, to fill the gaps which have been there so that these policies can work. But most important is going by what Chapter 4 of the National Cooperative Policy has in place, is that there is an implementation framework which should be done, and I feel this would be the first thing that should be done. As we do that, we should also analyze why these policies take so long to be put in place. There are key players in other sectors. I want to mention the political sector, because most of the policies at counties which get stalled at cabinet level, at assembly level, and even ours, which took time in parliament, it's because the political arena also need to understand the role that the cooperative sector play. We need to sensitize our people. We need to educate and train. But most important, we also need to have more of such fora. And when we have this fora, or forums, they should also be part and parcel so that they understand what the cooperative sector is going through. Thank you so much.
Lucy, you have something? Concluding, because we are running behind time. Just 1 minute, please.
comment about. On borrowing, let's make the farmer rich. We have better pricing, we pay him well, and timely payment so that it becomes credit-worthy. Let's not say the farmers do not qualify, they cannot access credit. They are not able to repay because of so many other challenges. If we make the farmer rich by paying him well and paying him on time, he'll be a business farmer, he'll be an employer, he'll be credit-worthy. So I think we have a job to do. Thank you.
Asante sana. Just like I said, in the interest of time, I may not be able to recap what the panelists have actually shared with us, but I want to thank both of you very much for finding time to make it physically for this panel discussion. And I also thank Professor Gishero as well as Mark Matabi for finding time to be part of this. Thank you. Makofi.
So delegates, let's appreciate the panel members for the insightful discussions that they have given. Now, we are now going to move on to the next session, and this is the breakaway sessions. We have 4 breakaway rooms, and immediately after this, we are going to close this session. We will expect that each one of us now will move into the breakaway session of interest virtually. So this room is now going to be closed. Now, when you go into the main room of the conference, immediately the breakaway rooms are opened. You will receive a message on your gadget prompting you to select the room of your interest. We have 4 rooms, and these rooms are in line with the themes, sub-themes, sorry. Room number 1 is named Group 1, and that is on remembering women, PWDs, etc. Then we have the second room is labeled Group 3, and these are cooperatives of the future. We have the 4th breakaway rooms, and this is labeled enablers of cooperatives. And then we have the last room, that is the 4th room. It is labeled Group 5, and these are the young scholars initiatives. That's where they are. So all those young scholars, that is where the deliberations will be. Now, in terms of managing the breakaway rooms, the chairs of those sessions who are already there will manage those rooms, and when the presentations are over, the attendees are welcome to join any of the other ongoing breakaway rooms, or depart then and join us tomorrow morning when we come to the last day of the conference. So as far as this is concerned, we are now bringing it to a close. I'm sure same time, the registration and login will begin at 8:30. The first presentation, which will be a panel presentation, will begin immediately at 9, sorry. So in terms of those who are here, as you go virtual, there is a health, you can first get a health break, and then please join us virtually. So thank you very much. Can we appreciate ourselves? And the in charge of the managing of the rooms, you can now open the breakaway rooms. Thank you very much.